Let's dive into the newest, arguably the 8th power system of the One Piece world that has been fully revealed to us in the latest chapters of One Piece, which is the Mu Covenant power system. There's been some confusion as of late about how this works exactly, about who gets what, and why certain things aren't happening, X, Y, Z, and the other. And I'm here to break it down and explain to you the system itself, because once again, Oda is really diving into the depths of power systems, and he's adding another one, which is very important because immortality factor and other crazy things are coming along with this power system. First and foremost, the 8 power systems in the story so far, when you include the Mu Covenant system, are number 1, base power. Base power includes things like physical strength, speed, durability, things of that sort. Your baseline overall strength. Number 2 would be the martial arts of the One Piece world. So we're talking about things like Kenjutsu. So of course, let's say the swordsmanship of Zoro or Brook or Mihawk, or let's say Das Bones even, or the 9 Scabbards, things of that sort. And then you have things like, let's say, the Kempo practitioners. So you have Sanji's and Zeph's red leg and black leg style. You have Fishman karate. You have the Hashoken from the Kanokuni boys. Even marksmanship would be considered a form of martial arts. And obviously, among this category too would be the Marines and World Government's martial arts, the 6 powers. Number 3 are, of course, the Duffer users, where you have the Paramecia, you have the Logia, and you have the Zoan ability users, and then these abilities can also awaken into a higher state of power. Number 4 is Haki, broken down normally in the Observation, the Conquerors, and the Armament Haki. Things like the Voice of All Things can even be categorized as a subdivision of the Observation Haki. The Breath of All Things, another version, let's say Armament Haki. It is all under the guise of Haki. That is number 4. Number 5 is technology. So technology, let's say in the form of cyborgs like Frankie or Queen the Plague. Of course, you have full-on robots that we see in the story as well, automata, mobile suits in the Iron Pirate Frankie Shogun, or in the Vega Force 1, things of that sort. These are all scopes of technology in the world of One Piece. Even things like Nami's climate control, where she's able to control the weather itself, or even Usopp's slingshot, where he uses different types of fauna and plants in order to fight. These things will be also categorized in the scope of technology, the umbrella of technology. Number 6 would be the race-related powers, things that predominantly a certain race of people can do from birth. So of course, we're talking about, let's say, the minks and their electro, or let's say the fishermen and their merman or fishman karate, or let's say the giants and their raw physicality, or let's say the Lunarians and their insane durability factor. These things would be race related that are specific to this race of people from birth. And then number 7 are the mysterious soul related powers, where we do have things like the fruits themselves being able to reincarnate, where like their souls do travel from one fruit to another fruit. Brook's Deathroot power being able to reincarnate his soul, even though his body is no longer flesh and blood, his soul operates on a higher frequency, allowing him to still function as a living entity in the world itself. Even science, or let's say weapons, having sort of personalities, where the cursed blades of One Piece have a distinct personality to them, indicating things of the mysterious underlying soul abilities that exist in the story. And now we have the 8th power, which could be, I'll admit this, it could be a variant of the 7th power, which is soul manipulation in some sense. However, until we can get more insight on this, we're not too sure. So the 8th power system, the Mu Covenant. So the immortality factor that we first saw on Agate Island, where Saturn could take all these attacks from all these people and not even a dent or scratch remain on Saturn's body. Even got turned to Swiss cheese by Monkey D. Luffy and Bonnie in their combo move, and Homeboy still came back. It was very unusual to see someone like Luffy struggle doing lasting damage to somebody, considering how powerful his haki is. But Saturn could come back and still march on and march through. He was of the Abyssal Covenant with Emu. The Holy Knights seem to have their own covenant as well with Lord Emu, but it's not to the same extent as the covenant with the elders. They have the Depths Covenant. And what we saw on Shanks' arm in chapter 1152, when he was with Gaban, that same tattoo we see in chapter 1167 and hinted at to us during the God Valley flashback with Gunko. And this is the very first level of the Mu Covenant, the Devoted Blade. Now, what is the Devoted Blade? According to what we know from the elders, let's start at level 1 here. The Devoted Blade is a Shallows Covenant. It is the lowest of the 3 stages of the Covenant of Mu, mere trace of the bond between the person and the higher being known as Emu. In chapter 1167, when Harald is given the Shallows Covenant, he is clearly unaware of Emu's existence. There's even a line that is said in that chapter, "What is this god you speak of?" indicating very clearly that the elders are able to pass out the Shallow Covenants. It's only when you get the Depths Covenant and then the Abyssal Covenant are you actually granted the true powers of Mu. But what does it mean exactly to have the Shallows Covenant, to have a trace of the bond between yourself and the Gray One? It looks like it doesn't mean much at all. At the most, what it probably means is that you're an intern. You're an intern trying to apply for the job of Holy Knight. That's all it really means. But are you part of the company in earnest? No, you're not. And in the case of Emu and the Mu Covenant, it looks like the Shallows Covenant, you're a remote intern. You're working from home as an intern. So you're even further removed from the company. If someone has the Shallows Covenant on their body, that tattoo, nothing changes. Insofar as we know, nothing changes. People have wondered the question, hey, hold on. If Shanks had the tattoo on his arm, up until, let's say, his arm got bitten off by the Lord of the Coast, that means that Shanks had the Shallows Covenant when he stole the Gum Gum fruit from Cypher Pole. Why is it that Emu didn't intervene in some way? Holy Knights weren't sent, and so on and so forth. Why weren't these things happening when Shanks stole the fruit from Who's Who in Cypher Pole? He should have had the Shallows Covenant on him. And the idea is simple. Because the Covenant is so shallow, Emu cannot control someone that's under that Covenant. At best, what you get is a phone call from Emu here and there. And that's at best, maybe not even at all. So it's very likely that Emu was completely unaware of what Shanks was doing when he stole that different ability, because again, the Covenant is but a mere trace. It's not something that's solid or foundational. Think about this. In chapter 1167, we see Harald talk to Saul. Saul, who betrayed the Marines and world government. Saul, who was on O'Hara. Saul that got the books from O'Hara, all these things. But none of that is brought up by Emu when Emu rose the status of Harald from Shallows Covenant to the Depths Covenant. But actually peering through them and finding out what's going on in real time, things of that sort, Emu probably couldn't do. In the same way that we saw Emu take over Gunko's body in real time on Elbaf, that wouldn't happen with, let's say, Gunko during God Valley when she was a devoted blade of Emu, was on the immortal level, the true levels that matter. Think of the Shallows Covenant as virtually nothing but maybe a phone call here and there. Not even the ability to, let's say, use the teleportation abyssal circles. It's only when he becomes a Depths Covenant member, he becomes a God Knight, that Emu does say, put a circle, an abyssal circle in Elbaf. And now let's get to that level right there. Number 2, the actual levels that start to matter, the Depths Covenant. The Depths Covenant is when the tattoo, the circle and the cross around the circle, that circle gains horns on the top half of the circle. It is the very same symbol that we see on Killingham's armband in chapter 1140. That very same symbol on his armband in that chapter, we see in full light in chapter 1168. In full light. And we see it form, and we see the process where, according to Harald, the moment started to happen, he felt a rippling chill through his body. His strength was growing, but he was frightened by it. His body went through a metamorphosis, and now he was fully under the guise of Lord Emu. According to what Emu says later on in that chapter, those who have accepted this Depths Covenant are given immortality and strength, but must obey orders in return. So your physical stats go up. You have greater durability, you have greater speed, things of that sort. But also, you have the immortal factor now. Now is when immortality factor matters. Now. And because we saw earlier in Elbaf, Gunko and Shamrock teleport from the Holy Land to Elbaf, you now have access to the Abyssal Warp. In chapter 1140, we even see Gunko make the summoning circle to summon Killingham and Summers. Obviously a trait that someone couldn't do without a stronger tie with Emu. And she even forced Summers and all the stuff around him, plus Killingham, when he's trying to find out where to go to get teleported to, like where's the Abyss, they were forcibly teleported to Elbaf. And when she says, I'll make the call, and then Shamrock says, go ahead, it does imply that Shamrock himself could also make the call too. And we do know on Egget Island that Saturn was the one to bring over the rest of the 5 elders with the magic circle. So the scope of powers that you gain when you're now a member of the Depths Covenant are astronomical. Again, at the cost of having your body be controlled. So in the same way that Gunko's body was taken over by Emu, it could be very similar here to Harald in chapter 1168. You do see Harald kind of stumble and fumble as he kind of is losing himself. And you do see that sort of rippling effect in the darkness, and Emu's eyes form from those ripples. That could be the takeover process that Gunko went through, happening in that moment with Harald, but he's trying to fight back against it. But I digress. The real stuff comes when you have the Depths Covenant. When folks were memeing and they were trying to push the idea that Shanks had immortality factor in earnest when he got that covenant, the Shallows Covenant, no, that is false. Shanks didn't have a stronger body or immortality factor or any of that stuff. You get that power boost when you become a knight. Though with Gunko, things do get a little bit tricky, because with Gunko, we maybe saw her 56 years ago as not a devoted blade, but as one of the nurses or aides to Emu itself, because seemingly she's there when Rox pulls up and confronts Emu. And then on God Valley, almost 2 decades later, she's on God Valley as a devoted blade, and she looks the same. Now, obviously, that could be, let's say, Gunko's relative, like, let's say, her mother or her aunt. But at this point in time, we just don't know. And again, that moment when Rox meets Emu, that person looks the same. They look like Gunko. So with her, it's a bit questionable, because one of the things we do see from the God Valley incident all the way up to real time, we do see that even though they are members of the Holy Knight and they have immortality factor, they age. They still age. So they have immortal bodies, but they don't have everlasting life. Summers and Garling clearly age from when they're in the God Valley flashback to present day. And we do see in chapter 1167 what Garling looked like 24 years ago in the past, which would be like 14 years after God Valley. Around the same year Raj was executed and the Great Pirate Era started. It's around that point in time we do see Harald get his first tattoo, the Shallows Covenant, and we see Garling there, so he's 14 years older, and it's noticeable. You do see how much older he became. The same thing goes for Figureland Shamrock. Shamrock and Shanks are next to each other in that very same chapter, and that was 15 years ago. At that point in time, Shamrock is a what? He is considered a holy knight of God, which means that he has the same Depths Covenant that Harald has at the end of 1168. But when we see Shamrock's full figure for the first time in chapter 1137, you can clearly see that Shamrock in this chapter is older. He is significantly older than what he was 15 years ago when we see him in the flashback. So there are 3 distinct cases. With Garling, with Summers, and with Shamrock, we do see members who are of the Depths Covenant age over the course of time. What Gunko may have, maybe not officially, but in a roundabout way, sneakily, she may have the last level of the Mu Covenant, the Abyssal Covenant. Now, what are the key differences between the Depths Covenant and the Abyssal Covenant? The Abyssal Covenant comes with something like probably everlasting life. She's a devoted blade on God Valley and a God's Knight now, but maybe the entire time, because she was an aide to Emu, she was always an Abyssal level Covenant individual. Potentially. She doesn't really age. over the course of time, her body remains the same. During the God Valley flashback, we see St. J. Garcia Saturn and how he looks in the God Valley flashback 38 years ago. 38 years later, in real time on Agate Island, he looks the exact same. Furthermore, we do know in chapter 1125, he was there 200 years ago when a meth pulled up to the Holy Land, and he looks the exact same back then too. Even the silhouettes of the 5 elders that we see during the O'Hara flashback, they all look the same. All of the 5 elders, and maybe sneakily Gunko too, all the 5 elders have not just immortality factor, they have everlasting life. That is a key distinct trait separating the elders from the holy knights. And it's very possible that Imu can only grant out the Abyssal Covenant to only so few people, where you have more holy knights than you do 5 elders, but it could be a limit to how many folks are able to gain the Abyssal Covenant. But since Imu is clearly not giving every holy knight the Abyssal level covenant, some of them serving for decades loyally to Imu and the Holy Land, but still they're only at Depth's Covenant, is a sign that the Abyssal Covenant can't be given out to everybody. Another key difference that we see between the Depth's Covenant and the Abyssal Covenant is that when you compare Imu arrive in certain locations from the Holy Land to the Lesser World, the Blue Sea, in chapter, once again, 1149, we see Imu kind of just take over Gunko's body. Her eyes become Imu's eyes. We do see the shadow over the face, kind of signifying that Mu is there, and so on and so forth. So Imu is still in the Holy Land as far as we know, but took over Gunko's body, remote control. However, when we jump over to the God Valley flashback, 1162, we see Imu in its towering form in the flesh or in the shadows appear right on top of Saturn, as if Saturn now became a mindless mount, and then Imu was there personally to get the job done. Now, there is a chance that that's not really Imu in full, to where parts of Imu still linger in the Holy Land. That is possible. But then a few chapters later, in chapter 1165, we do see Saturn on the ship, and then Saturn on the marine ship still has Imu controlling him. So why would Imu still control Saturn at that point in time when they're leaving? Just teleport back to the Holy Land. Maybe it's because it couldn't. It was summoned directly by Saturn to be on God Valley itself. So in terms of the level of possession between the 2 levels, the Depth's Covenant, you have the Gunko level control, where Imu can remote control you from the distance. But then with the Abyssal Covenant, Imu itself could personally arrive wherever that person is and then use that Abyssal Covenant user as a mount of some kind and control them at will directly. So that's number 2 when it comes to the main differences between the Abyssal Covenant and the Depth's Covenant. Number 3 is unique abilities. Peep this. When we go to the God's Knights, what do we see? We see a few folks that have devil fruit powers in earnest. We see Gunko, she has the arrow fruit. We know that Summers has the thorn fruit. Also, Killingham has the dragon fruit mythical model Kirin. So we see clear signs of devil fruit powers being used by members of the Holy Knights. We know they're fruits because they're named as such and they're categorized as such. But we don't see the same thing for the 5 elders.
Maybe Cole believe all these forms.
However, we don't know if they are devil fruits in earnest. People say that they are, but that's their assumption. It is what it is. That's the assumption that folks make. When they are introduced in the Planetfall chapter 1110, we have the names of their powers for the first time revealed. We have Saturn with the Gyuki, Mars with the Itsumade, Tommen with the Feng Si, Ethan with the Bokotsu, and then we have Jupiter with the Sandworm. That's all they're signified as. Nor does it say, hey, this is the cow fruit mythical model Gyuki, or this is the worm fruit mythical model Sandworm. In the same way that Killingham's powers are denounced as the dragon fruit mythical model Kirin, it does not apply to, let's say, the Feng Si. Pig fruit mythical model, no. Or horse fruit mythical model, no. None of that is applicable to the 5 elders. And there's also a rule of thumb that Oda established in the series a long time ago, that if the elders themselves were mythical Zoan users, it would break that rule of thumb. It'd be a retcon. And that retcon is what's stated to us during Marineford War by Kizaru. When Kizaru fights against Marco, what does he say? He says, even rarer than Logia mythical Zoan abilities. Right now in the canon, there are 13 Logia abilities, and there are 10 mythical Zoan powers. However, if you include the Emu-related transformations and assume that they are also mythical Zoans, then the number jumps from 10 to 16, which is starting to break the canon that was previously established, because again, these abilities should be rarer than Logias. So we would need at least 4 more new Logia powers to appear in the story to overcome the amount of new mythical Zoan powers. But there's no need for that if you don't categorize them as such, because again, as far as we know, they are not indicated as such. The 5 elders have unique abilities that allow them to transform into these crazy demonoid creatures, and so far they're only applicable to them and Shamrock's sword. In chapter 1138, we see Shamrock manifest a Cerberus from his sword, and it's in the same vein as the 5 elders when they transform. We have the black Hagoromo scarf around the Cerberus's neck. We have the Cerberus introduced as Cerberus, not Inu or dog fruit, mythical model Cerberus. It just says Cerberus. That's it. But what's very interesting, for sure, is the fact that it's on Shamrock's sword and not Shamrock himself. This could be a sign that Emu is considering the idea of infusing Shamrock with the Abyssal Covenant. And if we follow the same trend as, let's say, what happened with the Depths Covenant, maybe you'll get horns on the bottom of the circle. So horns on the top and horns on the bottom of the circle would be the mark of the Abyssal Covenant, the highest level of the Mu Covenant. Shamrock is introduced as the commander of the Holy Knight. So he's not just the Holy Knight, he's the commander. So his achievements among all the other Holy Knight achievements is probably the highest by far. Hence why he's the commander. But maybe even so high to where they granted him a sword that has an ability that normally would belong to the Abyssal Covenant users. But he's that nasty, he gets it when he only has the Depths Covenant, but only for his blade. Probably because these unique abilities of these demonic creatures can only be handled by folks that have the Abyssal Covenant, not the Depths Covenant. And all the other features too, like being able to make the magical circle, obviously being able to teleport from A to B through the abyss, the immortality factor, the stronger physical body, and so on and so forth. All these things would apply to the Abyssal Covenant user. But those are the key differences between the Shallow Covenant and the Depths Covenant, and the Depths Covenant and the Abyssal Covenant. Those are all the key differences for this power system. There probably is more, I won't deny that, because for example, when we do see Emu fight against the giants on Elbath via Gunko, they make a book, and then from that book they make a giant cannon gun pistol. So there are things that are not yet revealed, and that could be more Gunko specific, rather, let's say, Abyssal power or Mu Covenant specific. Not too sure at this point in time. Gunko right now is the odd chick out. Things for her are a bit wonky, and a lot of them could be outside the paradigm of what Emu itself is doing to her specifically. But again, only time can tell. For the time being, those are the key factors between those 3 levels. And hopefully, it's a long video, but hopefully you sat through it and it gave you greater insight as to how this power system works. And we'll adjust our take on the power system as time goes on and we find out more information. So if you enjoyed your boy's video, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and of course, click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys and gals on the flip side.